Hello, everyone. Gordon Causey, as always, and as always, Candy the Wonder Pup from a slightly different location, still same address, but now coming to you from a spare room. I was doing a podcast, doing a talking with someone, Rick Thomas, a gentleman who lives out in the west coast of Canada, someone I know through Facebook, who is very much supportive of the Palestinian cause. And we were having something of a discussion or a debate, if you want to call it that. Although, what's nice about Rick and myself, I think both of us were able to disagree without being disagreeable. And I have uploaded that podcast interview discussion onto my channel. It's not under live, though. You have to go to videos. So if you want to watch that, and if you want to see, both sides being represented, at least two individuals, I'm very much supportive of Israel, as most will be aware. Rick, by contrast, is far more supportive of the Palestinians. And we're going to continue this. We're playing. She wants this. So give me a paw. Lay down. Speak. Come on up. There you go. And she's trapped now. She can't run away. There's a bed she can go climb under. She does like to sequester herself somewhat. Anyway, got in behind me an old army cot and Canadian American flag. Can't really see the American flag. I'm blocking it out, but I am Canadian born, although I did spend about 10 years growing up in the US. So it's fitting that the Canadian flag is both larger and on top of the American flag from my perspective. I just wanted to do a video tonight talking about, updates on what's happening with the situation in Israel. There have been a couple key events within the last few days. Number one, the International Criminal Court, the ICC, based out of The Hague in the Netherlands. I don't know that they've actually done it yet, but they have signaled that they will be issuing arrest warrants for Benjamin Netenyahu, his Minister of Defense, as well as 3 senior members of Hamas. What exactly that means, Israel does not recognize the International Criminal Court. I don't know if Hamas does or not. I don't know if Iran does or not, because, of course, as everyone should know, Hamas is linked to Iran, along with Hezbollah and the Houthis down in Yemen. So that's one bit of news. I don't think it's going to have much of a tangible impact, although restrict Benjamin Netanyahu from perhaps. And the other bit of news, even more significant in my mind, is the fact that Spain, Norway, and Ireland the 3 of them have signaled that in the coming days, they're going to formally recognize an independent nation state of Palestine, something that doesn't exist yet. I don't know if the Palestinians have ever made a formal declaration of independence. It's such a problematic situation, given that the citizens of Gaza and the citizens of the West Bank, which would be where the primary populations of people who identify themselves as being Palestinian, that's where they exist in 2 geographically disparate regions, the West Bank and Gaza. And there are people who live within Israel proper who identify as Palestinian. But what exactly it would mean, what it does, in my mind, is it will embolden the Palestinians, because this is happening in the wake of the October 7th attack, which everyone knows about, when Hamas launched rockets and broke through the border fence and attacked Israel, took 200 plus hostages, including babies, and drive them back into the Gaza Strip. And so it somewhat rewards that behavior. Years ago, I used to think that before I was fully aware of all the history involved, and there's just so much to take in. I know that both the Arab Muslim population and the Jewish Zionist population, that they had engaged in terrorist acts against Britain. The Palestinians wanted a state, and the Zionists wanted a state out of what remained of the British Mandate for Palestine. And the British were trying to stick handle that situation, and they were trying to create a Zionist state, a Jewish nation state, and another Palestinian state, because they'd already created one. I think this is something that's forgotten, conveniently ignored, is the fact that the British Mandate for Palestine was initiated in 1920. It was born out of a conference in San Remo, Italy. You can look this up. And it established the British Mandate for Palestine, and it included all of what is Israel today, including the occupied territories, as well as all of present-day Jordan. That was the original Palestinian Mandate. And then in 1921, Britain took 77% of their mandated territory of the Mandate for Palestine, and they gave 77% of it to be ruled by the Arabian Hashemite dynasty that had allied with Great Britain during World War I. So they said, we'll give you a country. We'll take 77% of our mandate for Palestine, and you can have a country to rule. And that country became known as initially Transjordan. Later, in 1946, the name was changed to simply Jordan. And now, so initially, Jordan was part of what was Palestinian, was Palestine. Anyone living in Jordan up until 1921, and between 1920 and 1921 for 1 year, give or take, I don't know, what month exactly, the San Remo Conference created the Palestinian Mandate, and I don't know what date exactly. I think it was in the spring of 1921 when Winston Churchill in Cairo signed a piece of paper creating a protectorate called Transjordan. It was about a year that people living on the west, not in the West Bank, but in what is Jordan today, they switched from being Palestinians to being Jordanians, and what remained of the Palestinian Mandate was what is today Israel, including Gaza and the West Bank. So Israel proper, as well as what are referred to typically as the occupied territories. The people living in the West Bank between 1949 right up until 1967, they were Jordanians, because after the war, that established Israel as a country. If you've watched this channel before, I've gone through the history so many times, it's second nature to me now. In 1948-49, there was a war between the Zionists in Israel and 5 nations of the Arab League: Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and the Saudi Arabians. Those 5 Arab League nations sent armies to invade what had formerly been British mandated Palestine, the remaining part of it. And after the war ended, the Jordanians had captured the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and the Egyptians had captured the Gaza Strip. And they didn't create a Palestinian country. They just incorporated their new territory into their countries. And I think that's what would have happened with the remainder if the Arab nations had succeeded, if they hadn't suffered a humiliating Nakba, humiliating defeat, getting defeated by a country that only declared its independence on May 14, 1948. Only 700,000 to 800,000 men, women, and children of, these were the Zionists, You only had 800,000. That's the entire population, men, women, and children. And the invading nations, those 5 countries, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, those 5 nations in 1948, 1949, they had populations of over 30 million. So to lose that kind of war, yeah, it's a Nakba, it's a catastrophe, it's a humiliating defeat, and they've never gotten over it. But in 1967, that's when Israel gained control over the West Bank and Gaza during that, what is typically referred to as the 6-Day War. Israel just keeps getting attacked, and everyone is, talking about. We have Spain and Norway and Ireland now talking about recognizing a Palestinian state, pushing forward this idea of a 2-state solution, promoting this idea that a Palestinian state and an Israeli state can live in harmony and peacefully beside one another. And I'm here to say that's an impossibility. And how do I know it's an impossibility? Because history, 1948-49, Israel established itself as a country, and the Arab world would not accept it. So in 1967, we had a second war. And in Israel, against all odds, again, because that war was 3 against 1. The first war was 5 against 1. The second war, 1967, major war, was 3 against 1. It was Egypt, Jordan, and Syria all attacking. And Israel took territory from all 3. From the Egyptians, they captured Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula. From the Jordanians, they captured the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And from the Syrians, they captured the West Bank. And so another Nakba, another catastrophe, another humiliating defeat. Then in 1973, Israel was attacked again. And Israel in that war didn't capture any new territory like they did in 67, but they maintained what they had. They didn't lose any territory. Another humiliating defeat for the Arab world. And I'm here to say that the Arab world will never, ever accept the existence of a Jewish nation state in the Middle East. They'll just keep going, and that by establishing Palestine and giving them the territory of the West Bank and Gaza, that it's a recipe for emboldening the Palestinian population to engage in further attacks until their ultimate goal is achieved of wiping Israel out from the river to the sea, from the Jordan River right through to the Mediterranean Sea. And I don't think there's any solution to this other than one side has to achieve total victory and another side has to achieve total defeat. And that's why I think we're heading to the escalation process is slow, but it's steady. A few days ago, everyone should know by now that the president of Iran, as well as a senior member of the cabinet, and some other individuals on an old Bell helicopter built probably in the 60s or 70s, 40, 50-year-old helicopter crashed, killing the prime minister, a key member of the Iranian leadership, another one, two senior members, the president and a senior member of the cabinet, dead. And what I've read lately, I haven't seen the results of it, is that Iran is conducting an investigation trying to determine the cause of the crash. I do not believe anything's been reported in terms of the result of that investigation, but it would not surprise me if that investigation comes back with the result saying that there was outside American, Israeli blame to be put on them, that it was that helicopter was brought down in some fashion. We'll have to wait and see. Are they just going to say that it was old equipment, bad, or an old aging helicopter, 40, 50 years old, and bad inclement weather and treacherous terrain, which made search and rescue very difficult? Time will only tell. But in the interim, I do think at some point we're going to see a significant escalation. As I say, on Israel's northern border, there are increased levels of activity between Hezbollah and Lebanon and Israel to the northern part of Israel that abuts on Lebanon. The situation in Gaza is that a large percentage of the population in Gaza has been pushed down into this southern enclave region city of Rafah, which borders the Rafah crossing that crosses into Egypt. Egypt has closed the border on their side. I don't think Egypt doesn't want Gaza back. They had it offered to them in the 1978 or 1979, I forget exactly what year, during Jimmy Carter administration. There were the Camp David peace accords that took place with President Jimmy Carter at Camp David, which is a retreat, a U.S. presidential retreat. And Jimmy Carter was joined there by Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and the Egyptian President Anwar Sadat. They signed the Camp David peace agreement. And what the result of that is that Egypt recognized that Israel has a right to exist. So they formally recognize Israel as a nation state and basically said, we're not going to try and wipe you off the map from the river to the sea. And in return, Israel gave them back the Sinai Peninsula that Israel had captured in 1967. Israel also tried to give them back the Gaza Strip, but Egypt didn't want it. And everything I've read says that the reason the Egyptians didn't want Gaza back is because the population in that strip was seen as being far too radical. It was a hotbed for something called the Muslim Brotherhood, which was the parent organization of Hamas. And Hamas, of course, we know what they did on October 7th. So things are as confusing as ever. I do think things are going to ramp up. And I do think there's very much, I think we may look back and say, when did World War III start? And I think October 7th may be listed as the day when World War III officially started. I forget exactly when, but it was early in the year, like April or May in 1914, when the Archduke Ferdinand, the presumptive heir to the throne of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, when he and his wife Sophia were assassinated, murdered. And that is widely regarded. People say, what was the start of World War I? That is determined to be, that's what started it. But the conflict didn't start until the fall. Didn't start until September, October, November, as alliances started to fall. October 7, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. So we're 7-8 months after the events of October 7th, and we have seen escalation take place. We've seen the Houthis down in Yemen. They're a rebel group that controls 80% of Yemen. They're in a war themselves against the officially recognized government of Yemen, which is backed by the Saudi Arabians. And they've been fighting a brutal civil war for the past 10 years between the Iranian-backed Houthis and the Saudi-backed government of Yemen have been going at it and just murdering the hell out of out of the Yemeni population. Over 400,000 people have died during the civil war, dying either from the conflict, directly from the conflict itself, meaning casualties, collateral damage. Others are dying just because they don't have access to standard basic medical care, and many are even starving to death because war hammers supply chains, and it hammers a civilian population. And it's said that of the 400,000 people who have been killed in Yemen since that civil war broke out, that over 250,000 of them are children under the age of 5. And you talk about a genocide. 400,000 people over the past 10 years, 250,000 children under 5 years of age. Gets no press coverage or anything. You know, it's an internal little struggle going on between Yemen and neighboring Saudi Arabia. They're both Islamic countries. Iran is backing the Houthis. Iran is Shia Muslim. The Saudi Arabians are primarily Sunni Muslim. You know, I mean, within the Arab world, within the Middle East, there seems to be a constant battle going on over who the leader of the Arab world is going to be. Nasser in Egypt wanted to create this pan-Arabic world with Egypt as the primary, supreme power. The Saudis have the same aspirations. The days of the old caliphate, when it was the Arabians who ruled most of the Middle East, and their caliphate extended into North Africa and all over the place. And of course, then you have Iran, which is the old Persian Empire, and they want to be the ones driving the bus. They want to be the ones in charge. To put it into terms of the movie The Godfather, everyone wants to be the Corleone family, and then all the other families are trying to knock off the Corleone family. So that's happening within the Arab world. The Saudis and the Iranians don't get along. The Saudis don't get along with the Yemenis. They don't get along with the Jordanians. Egypt is another, and I imagine what would happen is that if the Arab world did succeed, if they, could not experience a Nakba, a humiliating and catastrophic defeat, if they could actually turn around and defeat the Israelis and achieve their goal of wiping Israel off the map from the river to the sea, what you would have, in my guesstimation, is another war. And it would be a war between Saudi Arabia and Iran and Lebanon and Syria and Egypt, and they'd all go to war fighting over this piece of real estate, which is significant because it's on the Asian continent, but it's basically the linchpin between Europe, Africa, and Asia. It's the nexus of 3 continents, and it's right on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, rather. So we will see what happens. Tomorrow I'll be debating it further. At least that's the plan for now. And again, if you want to watch Rick Thomas and I, he writes a Substack. He's something of a historian, like myself. But like any 2 guys discussing an issue, there are things that I've read that he hasn't. There is a lot that he's read that I have not. That's mentioned in the video. And so there's just so much information out there, and what you read can often influence your opinions. You can be ignorant of certain things. He brought up an individual who was the actual author of in his opinion, or based on what he has read, based on what Rick has read, that this guy, and I forget the name, I've written it down. I've got a reading list to go through. I don't know. I've got a couple people watching. I've gotten a couple thumbs up. Thank you, guys. If you want to put any comments in the live chat, it is on. So I don't mind discussing things and getting different frames of view. I just find the situation so, unfortunately, it's tragic. And where Rick wants to go with our conversation tomorrow is on eschatology, which is just a fancy word for end times theology. I have Mud Duck Farmer asking or saying, the big question is, will it get better or more crazy? It's crazy everywhere now. Amen. I can't disagree with anything you wrote there. Will things get better? I don't think so. I don't think things are going to get better. I think with Norway, Spain, and Ireland, signaling, I think it's on the 28th. I forget exactly what day, but they say there's a specific day on which they're going to recognize Palestine as an independent nation state. Now, that doesn't mean they're an independent nation state just because those three countries recognize it. Israel, on May 14th, 1948, they declared themselves an independent nation state. And I think it's within 11 minutes that Harry Truman and the Americans recognized Israel, but that still didn't make them a nation state, even though the United States recognized them. And likewise, the old Soviet Union recognized Israel shortly thereafter. The Americans were the first. Some American satellite countries, American allies, recognized Israel. Iran was one of the first countries to recognize Israel, but it must be understood that at that time in 1948, Iran was very much in the American sphere of influence, and they were being led by the Shah of Iran. The Iran of today, post 1979, after their Islamic revolution, they do not recognize Israel's right to exist. They refer to Israel constantly as the Zionist occupiers or the Zionist enterprise or the Zionist this or the Zionist that, which they treat Zionist as if it's a bad word. I don't have an issue with the word Zionist. Zion, the term Zion is used repeatedly throughout the Bible in reference to the land of Israel. That's how they refer to it, Mount Zion. So, I mean, things are crazy. To get back to Mud Duck Farmer's comment, things are crazy everywhere right now. I mean, one thing came out recently in my own little home province, this jurisdiction of Ontario, within the last day or two. Hamilton Region Health Authority has announced that a child under the age of 5, unvaccinated, died of measles. So a child who had not been vaccinated against measles died. And according to Hamilton Regional Health Authority, that it was measles, and this is significant, and this is according to Hamilton Regional Health, measles related. It's a measles related death, which is different from saying died directly as a result of measles. Now, apparently, the reporting is that the child came down with measles, was hospitalized, and died. The question I have, and that I know I will never get an answer, is did the child have any other underlying health issues? Did they have a hole in their heart? Did they have failing kidneys? Did they have leukemia? Did they have any serious underlying health issues, or was measles it? And the fact that they're not reporting on it and telling us anything about the health of this child, they could say a child perfectly healthy with no other health conditions whatsoever. That would be one thing, but they're not saying that. And our media, our journalists, who aren't journalists anymore, they're just basically spokespeople for the pharmaceutical industry and for government officials. They don't dig, they don't ask questions, they just tell you what the government said or what the pharmaceutical companies say. They never seek out alternative viewpoints. They never look for an opposing opinion. That's not allowed anymore. There's only one opinion allowed. And it reminds me of when, and I've mentioned it too many times, but I'm going to bring it up again in October of 2021. Alberta announced that that province had just experienced its youngest ever COVID death. And, this was just before the vaccine for COVID, the COVID vaccine, was authorized for use to children. So they announced we just had our youngest ever COVID death. A 14-year-old child died of COVID. But don't worry, the vaccines are coming out soon. And then it was only later, thanks to this young lad's two brave sisters, going to the Western Standard, an alternative media outlet, and blowing up the story that the child who had been reported to have died of COVID actually was suffering stage 4 inoperable terminal brain cancer, glioblastoma or whatever they call it, and that he was in a palliative setting, end of life care, where you're typically on something like a morphine drip, just trying to keep the child as comfortable as possible because they know he's going to die. And then just 2 days before his fully expected death, this young child had to he was subjected to what I call a nasal colonoscopy, that incredibly invasive PCR test, which thankfully myself, I've never had any COVID test. I've never had the PCR up the nose, and I've never done one of those stupid rapid tests either. Every time they were offered to me free at a place like the grocery store, they say, would you like some free rapid tests for COVID? Pass. I'd already read enough about, people testing tap water and Coke and Pepsi and orange juice and things, and everything comes back positive. So I'm like, pass. So this world is getting crazy. We've got bird flu infecting cows infecting humans. Next thing you know, they're going to tell us that humans are infecting humans. And all the while we have what could very well turn out to be a major global conflict breaking out in the Middle East, centered around Israel. And when I talk to Rick tomorrow, when you look at scripture, when you look at the Bible, basically from 100 miles up, the world's armies surround Israel and a major war. And we have Iran, which is allied with Russia. We have Russia with their no limit partnership that's been signed between them and the Chinese. And Russia is also cozied up with North Korea, with Kim Jong-il or Kim Jong-un, whatever his name is, guy with the wonderful haircut, although better than mine. And then you have Israel allied principally with the United States, although the population in the United States and Canada and much of Europe, there are so many Muslims who have emigrated into the Western world, into Canada, the US, Western Europe, London or England, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, that it's almost like a fifth column. And you have Al Jazeera, which is a Qatar-based Arabic news source, which is able to put the Palestinian cause front and center and frame it in a very sympathetic way. And that's not hard to do, because war is absolutely brutal. I don't know how it is that anyone thinks you can have a war that's basically, a gentleman war, following the rules of engagement and everything. War is chaos. The IDF is sending its soldiers into hostile enemy territory within Gaza, and they don't know friend from foe. This is irregular or so-called asymmetrical warfare, where Hamas, they don't wear uniforms. You don't know, it's a mind-blowingly difficult situation for a member of the IDF to have to go into Gaza and try and infiltrate and try and engage with Hamas. Hamas does embed itself within civilian populations, and that's to be expected because they're outmanned and outgunned. They haven't got the manpower that the IDF has, and they certainly don't have the weaponry, so they have to play to what advantages they have, and one of their advantages is to hide behind the civilian population and to put their military assets and infrastructure underneath schools, hospitals, refugee camps, anything they can do. And my support for Israel is unwavering. I think they're in basically almost an impossible situation. If they don't retaliate for what happened on October 7th, they embolden Hamas. And I don't think it matters at the end of the day. I think ultimately Hamas, and as well as elements within the West Bank population, They did polls shortly after October 7th, and 80% of the people living in the West Bank supported the attack. They were in favor of what Hamas had done to Israel. And so how can you ever find a solution? It's the immovable object against the irresistible force. And I think the ultimate end result is major, major, major escalation. And I will not repudiate or pull back on my support for Israel, because I believe Israel has the right to exist. And having the right to exist automatically infers that they further have the right to defend themselves. So that's about it. Mud Duck Farmer is the only one who's chimed in. If you want to watch that, my podcast style back and forth debate discussion with Rick Thomas, you're welcome to. Again, it's not, if you go to my page, my YouTube page for this channel, you'll see they'll have videos, shorts, live. Well, it's under the video section. It'll be the most recent one. I uploaded it today. We had the talk this afternoon. I'm not sure what time tomorrow. We haven't nailed down a specific time when we're going to do part 2. But in part 2, Rick wants to talk about eschatology, about end times theology, both Judeo-Christian end times theology, as well as end times theology from Islam, for the Muslims, because Muslims also have eschatology. They also have end times predictions within the Quran and maybe some other writings. Rick seems to know a little bit more about that, or a lot more than I know about that. He doesn't profess to know everything about it. He's not Muslim, but he seems to have read some of it, so he knows at least some of it more than myself. I haven't read any of the Quran except little snippets here and there that people have shared. But anyway, God bless. Thanks for watching. We'll see what the coming days, weeks, months bring. Appreciate. I got 4 thumbs up. Thank you. If you want to subscribe, you're welcome. The push to 1,000 continues, kind of stalling around 910, 920, somewhere in that range. But hopefully things will continue to grow. Hopefully I'll continue to be able to have conversations with other people. I enjoy that. I enjoy the live engagement. Thank you, Mud Duck Farmer. And I'll end it there. We'll be under 40 minutes, which is short for me lately. Anyway, God bless. We'll talk to you later.